back with another episode of Brief Meditations. I am Pastor Dana Kidder from Redemption Bible Church, and we're here to talk about, just for a couple of minutes, we've been on this series sort of laying out the basics of our church and why we are the way that we are. And I wanted to come back to this concept of elders and church polity, how we function. And the question is, why don't we vote as a church? And so in order to answer that, we kind of have to look at really the five different ways that churches operate. So pretty much every church operates under one of these five different church polities. So the first one is a single elder led. Usually this means that they have a senior pastor. He has a staff. Sometimes, depending on the size of the church, he might have associate pastors, but he's clearly the boss and the highest of the elders. Often in this model, there are no other elders, with that title, although frequently there are deacons. Sometimes, in fact, I would say probably most of the time, those deacons function in some way as overseers of the church. Sometimes they're trustees, and they may even have that title, but there's the single elder-led model. We are not like this. The second common way is really the Presbyterian model. This is where you have a distinction typically between, you have elders, usually a group of elders, but there's a distinction between ruling elders and teaching elders. I may have mentioned this before. The ruling elders are essentially the lay elders. They're the ones that are members of the congregation that have been ordained to the work of the oversight ministry of the church, whereas the teaching elders are the ones who are typically vocational. They're paid staff members. They would be what we would think of as the pastors of the church. But within this system, they also have a hierarchy of sessions, Presbyterian session. And so there's usually it's kind of broken up regionally. So there would be one in maybe in a region of a state, then the whole state, and then a portion of the country or something like that. And there's this hierarchy of courts until you come to usually some sort of general conference where they get together once a year with the entire denomination. That's the Presbyterian model. That's also not us. Then there's the congregational model. The Congregationalists are typically independent. This is many Baptist churches are either that single elder led or congregational, or typically a combination of the two, where you have a single senior pastor and the congregation that has the authority in the church. They are the ones that vote for the budget. They are the ones that vote to bring in and dismiss members, to hire or dismiss staff members, things like that. Sometimes they vote on minutia of details of the operation of the church. Sometimes they only vote on major things. But a congregational model. Incidentally, the Congregationalists in England were part of where the 1689 pulled their resources from. Partly from the Presbyterian model, the Westminster Assembly, and partially from the Congregationalists. We're also not Congregationalists. And I'm going to get to why here in just a minute. The fourth model is what we would call really the Episcopalian model. An episkopos, where we get that word episcopal from, the Greek word episkopos, it means bishop. And so there is, or overseer, but the Old English is bishop. And so there's a hierarchy of pastors up to bishops. And that's when you have, actually Roman Catholics have this hierarchy. Theirs is different than Protestants, but the Pope is the Bishop of Rome. That's what that comes from. The Archbishop of Canterbury is the functional head of the Church of England. So the king is the head of the church, but the functional sort of pastoral head of the church is the Archbishop of Canterbury. That's the Episcopalian model, where you have bishops that are really individual pastors' bosses, are from outside. Methodists use this model, as do some others that really pulled from their history of the Church of England. And then the final, we're also not Episcopalian. We have no authority besides Christ, outside of our church. And then finally is the fifth model. This is what we are, which is a plural elder-led church. We believe that this is the biblical model. So every time elders are mentioned, unless a specific elder is called out, like Peter calls himself an elder, Paul writes to Timothy or to Titus, he tells them to appoint elders. He tells Titus, appoint elders in every town. And so we believe that the biblical model is for a group of elders from the church are to lead the church. Some of them might be paid staff elders, and some of them might be lay elders, so they have outside employment somewhere else. That's what we do here. So we have a plural elder-led church. Sometimes churches that are plural elder-led also have some sort of voting and congregational input. We clearly have congregational input. We want congregational input. But this comes back to two passages where Jesus uses the phrase keys to the kingdom in Matthew 16 and Matthew 18. He uses it in both places, and talking about the authority to bind and loose. So these phrases are all connected together. It's about authority, and it's about authority within the local church. And so we believe that the elders of the church, the whole group, not just one of them, the whole group of elders has that authority. So for example, when there is a church discipline case where, Matthew chapter 18, we followed the steps, the person is unrepentant and we need to remove them. It is the elders who have the authority to say to the individual, you are no longer a member of this church. Please do not partake of the Lord's Supper because of your unrepentant sin. This isn't just arbitrary. This is because of your unrepentant sin. And so we believe that it's the elders who have walked through this situation with this person has that authority. Also, sort of the flip side and the maybe the more positive way to look at it is when we're bringing somebody into membership, we're baptizing someone. Typically, that person has spent some time with me. If we're bringing new members in through like transfer membership, they have met not only with me as the pastor of the church, but also with the group of elders without me there, where they are able to just shepherd them and talk with them and begin at least a relationship with them as their elders, as their pastors in the church. And so this is the model that we follow, is this plural elder-led. We believe all of the letters, when it's talking to elders, it is elders plural. So we believe this is the biblical model, is that the church, each individual autonomous church, is to have a plurality of elders from within the congregation. They're not sent in from the outside somewhere. They're from within the congregation, and they are to lead, feed, and protect the church, which we talked about in a previous episode. So why don't we vote? We do, kinda, in that we support the elders. The elders discuss and work through the issues together. So, for example, 2 years ago, we were presented with an opportunity to purchase our current building, move, change our name, all of that. Huge undertaking. And we put it out to the church. We had great discussions. We got some pushback. We got some feedback. And in the end, the elders decided, and we made that decision. The church supported that decision and has continued to grow and thrive because of that. And it's because of the faithfulness of the congregation to submit to, as Hebrews 13 says, and to follow the lead of the faithful men who are leading the church that God has put into place. And so when it works, it works. When the men are faithful, when the church is faithful, you see it work in a beautiful way, in the way that we believe God intended it to work. The leadership model of the church is to be plural, elder-led, like the apostles in the early church. This is what we believe. This is what we stand on. That's it for this week. We'll be back again next week. Brief Meditations with Pastor Dana Kidder. See you next week.